Hello and welcome to Cracked Open, a podcast guiding you on your journey to becoming a vessel of unconditional love. This is your host, Beck Milonas, High Priestess, Channel, and Activator. Join me on this series as I share reflections, insights, and channel transmissions from my journey of walking the initiation path. Each episode is a unique transmission containing supportive frequencies to facilitate the deepest healing, activation, and reconnection with your soul. I invite you to open your mind and set the intention to receive this episode into your heart space. Let's go. Welcome back, beautiful souls, to another episode of Cracked Open, a podcast guiding you to becoming a vessel of unconditional love. I'm so excited to introduce my guest today. This woman is a friend of a friend, but I actually just realized while we were dropping in, we've totally got some soul ties. So it's really exciting, this container that we're holding together today. There's some beautiful frequency behind it. Bringing on to the show today, we have Rachel. Welcome, Rachel. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. Can't wait.
And to introduce her formally with her bio, Rachel Horton White is a clinical hypnotherapist, mindfulness teacher, and intuitive guide who has helped transform the lives of clients worldwide in this massive planetary shift in consciousness through soulful work, intuitive consulting. Rachel helps people release negative patterns in their lives with practical tools like mindfulness, energy, and intuition exercises to connect with their true inner selves. She has led sold-out women's retreats, written for multiple online publications, and presented at national hypnotherapy conferences. She's also written a book, and we were just talking about some really cool life between life work that she's doing, which I'm sure we're going to talk about here because it's one of the things I'm really excited to bring onto this podcast because it's a topic I haven't really touched here. We're also filming this, guys, at 6:45 p.m. on 7th of August in the middle of the Lionsgate portal. So in Australia, it's happening. The 8th of the 8th is right now, right? So I'm in Australian time. I'm just saying that we're already I'm in Mexico, but I'm on Australian time. My body is still on Australian time. So I'm in the Lionsgate portal. There's going to be some Lionsgate stuff going on for us today. But before we get into that, I'm going to take it back. I'm going to chill out. And I'm going to ask you, Rachel, to introduce yourself to our listeners in your own kind of way. Tell us about your journey, what brought you here, what brought your gifts online, and what is the process that you went through to sit with me today, here and now, with all your gifts and all this magic that you're bringing into the world. I know it's a very ambitious question, but however you feel to answer that.
Yes, let's see. So yes, I'm just so excited to talk with you, and our friend Brandon introduced us from Expanding Reality. So just giving him a shout out. He's an amazing person. So yeah, I definitely was guided to be doing this work that I feel so blessed to be able to do, to share light just like you are, to help people as they awaken, as they, move into their truest, becoming their truest and highest selves. But I didn't always do this. So I, grew up in Maine, in the US, and always had some interesting, like, intuitive stuff that would happen. My mother is pretty intuitive herself, and she would tell me that she would wake me up by thinking about me in my crib, and I would just wake up. Every time she would think about me, I'd wake up. And I would have dreams that would come true, like on and off throughout my childhood and my adolescence. I knew my mother was pregnant with my brother. He's the youngest of four of us, and because I had a dream about it. And so a lot of my stuff would come to me in my dreams. And I started having dreams with some deceased people who had deceased. One of my mother's friends had ended her own life. And when I was a teenager, she came to me in a dream and told me to tell my mother some things like that were really helpful for my mother. So anyway, things like that. But I'd always kept it just kind of like behind the scenes, like just this kind of thing that, I thought was interesting. And I remember, doing a report on ESP in fourth grade and like reading books about what does it mean to be psychic. But I had heard, I was programmed to, as many of us were, to think that psychic stuff is weird and scary. And so I just kept it like, behind the scenes. And I ended up going into the nonprofit field in social services. And I did that after I went and lived abroad in Senegal. I lived in West Africa for study abroad there for a year when I was in college. And that just blew my mind. I wanted to give back. I wanted to be of service. And so I went into this nonprofit field and, worked with immigrants, refugees, asylum seekers, and did that on and off. But then I got really burnt out. And by that time I had met my husband, which I definitely had to do some soul work there. I had to basically manifest him, like visualize him. I had dreams about him, and I'd had this series of relationships that some of them very dysfunctional, unhealthy. So I had to break that pattern. Anyway, but then at that point we had my son, who's now 11, and I was I think I had just given birth to my daughter, who's now 8. But I was running this community center, and I was just like, I can't, I was just getting very stressed out, burnt out. And I remember everybody in the company got a book called Trying Hard Isn't Good Enough. And I was like, you know what? I'm done. Yeah. Like, thanks a lot. Right. If you're not paying me enough and I'm not good enough, even if I try hard. So that was like, you know what? I'm done. But I didn't know what else to do, because that's all I knew. Like, I got a master's degree in public administration, blah, blah, blah. I did all the traditional things, that you're supposed to do. So I hired a life coach, because our babysitter at the time, she's like, you need to get a life coach. And I was like, what the heck is that? So she's like, well, my daughter hired one and she quit her job the next day. And I was like, fine, I'll do whatever it takes. I don't even care. I just cannot set foot in that place one more day. And I'd been thinking about leaving for a few years, but I just didn't know what to do. And I mean, I was so stressed. I was grinding my teeth at night. My dentist said, you need to wear a thing on your head unless you get another job. And I was like, I'm going to do that, get another job. So, I mean, it was bad. Like, I was crying and just so angry, and I would go to yoga, but then I would, I'd try doing some meditation sometimes, but then I would come home and go to work and get all stressed out all over again. So anyway, I hired this life coach, and she's like, you need to start meditating more, again, because I had, before I met my husband, I had done some I learned about Buddhist meditation, trying to break this relationship pattern. And I started learning about the concept of ego, and, our thoughts create our reality, and started learning about the law of attraction, but I hadn't. So I I mastered the relationship, mastered, I guess I'd broken the pattern relationship, but the career, I still hadn't. So she said, start meditating again and start talking to some higher guidance, which I also had stopped being spiritual. I was raised in a, progressive Christian church, but I had wanted nothing to do with religion, which I still don't to this day. And so I had gone through this period of being almost close to atheist, but then I had a few things that happened that I really actually had experience with Jesus, like saw Jesus, he's one of my primary guides now. It was absolutely amazing. That's another story for another time.
Everyone on here knows I'm obsessed with J-Bomb.
Really? That's perfect.
I'm obsessed with J-Bomb. I'm like, I'm going to chime in. So many things I want to chime in, but I was like, I'm chiming in for J-Bomb.
Good.
My homie.
I wrote about it in my book too. Yeah. I wrote about this crazy experience I had basically seeing Jesus like in the sand of a tent, like this robed figure. It was just amazing. Anyway. And my boyfriend at the time saw it too. It was amazing. So anyway, so I started like just connecting with something. I had studied tarot. I was studying tarot cards on my own, and with her help, I kind of just started experimenting with different things, and I started awakening. So I started waking up to the illusions of reality. Another part of my story is that both my grandfathers were in the CIA, and that's how my parents met. Yeah. So one of them, my mother's father, I was very close to, and he became a whistleblower for the CIA and wrote a book called Deadly Deceits. His name's Ralph McGehee, and he kind of got, you can find him on Wikipedia, but he was telling the truth about what the lies of the U.S. government, especially around Vietnam and all the propaganda, and he really, he survived, but they really tried to ruin his life when he did start writing a tell-all book. Anyway. So he definitely is a huge hero for me. But it was actually, at this time I started this podcast, which I still have. It's just meditations now. But at the time I was interviewing people just for fun. And so I was researching his life, and I started coming across stuff. And that's when like these light bulbs started going off in my head. I was going way down the rabbit hole. And this was in 2015. So, then of course COVID happened, and that, like, I knew exactly what was going. I felt like I knew exactly what was going on. I was like, oh yeah, this is all just not what it seems. Let's just put it that way. So, but I started watching people wake up because of that, which was amazing. But anyway, so long story short, I started out thinking I was going to be doing this like meditation, like teaching people about energy and emotions and meditation and doing stuff like that. But then it became this whole other sort of business where I became, started doing intuitive work. The phrase the Akashic records, those two words came in my meditation one day, and I'd never heard of it. And I got a reading, and I was like, this is super cool. I want to learn how to do this. So I got training, and now I do Akashic records readings more than anything else that I do, probably. Started learning about life coaching, doing workshops and working one-on-one with people. And then I went back to school, integrative healing arts, and I learned hypnotherapy, which is something else. I was like, well, that's weird. Like, I'm not going to hypnotize people. But I found it so fascinating with how so many of us get, this subtle programming buried in our subconscious minds. And if only more people knew about it, it could really help people just shift out of these habits and patterns. And so I received I got hypnotherapy myself. And so, fast forward to today, I've just keep learning, and I do now past life regressions and life between life, like you mentioned, which is super cool. And I kind of noticed a theme when I started working with people of like how I was helping people in individual sessions. And I, it's basically like create a future vision of how you want to feel, and then clear the ego stuff, do some writing tools around it, hypnotherapy, neurolinguistic programming, connect with the inner child. And then I had this little Venn diagram. So I'm thinking of it this way, like this clockwise thing. And then, connecting with your higher guidance, help people connect with something, source, creator, God, whatever it is, light. And then, they have to, take action. And that is, something that's so important. Like, you've got to take some action, do something. And then the core of this was meditation, like teaching people how to quiet their minds. So I ended up putting all that stuff in a book, which took me years to do. I thought about it for 6 years. I sat down and actively wrote for 2 years, and it called Tools for the Awakening Soul, which I self-published last year. So yeah, I'm just blessed to be doing all these things. I teach people now how to do what I do in this intuitive guide program, and I do workshops and classes and individual stuff, and teach people how to read the Akashic records now too. But honestly, life between life regression is a new thing, and I just find it so fascinating, like what's happening in the spirit realm, and what do we do after we die, and who's there for us. And so
yeah,
I
it
just
feels
feel
like
so
this
blessed.
is where we're going to start the conversation for sure for me, because like
Yes.
every time you keep saying, I'm like, yep, this is where we're starting the conversation. So
Yes.
let's dive into this. So for people who don't know what life between life is, guys, there's this book that I read called Journey of Souls by Michael, what's his name? Sorry,
Michael Newton.
Yeah, really interesting book. Guys, if you're listening to this, read the book. It's amazing. And I think Dolores Cannon does
Dolores
similar
Cannon. Yeah. Yes.
work.
She calls it QHHT, but it's basically almost the same thing. Yeah.
Okay. So do you want to explain to people what life between life is, and what that light does not want to stay on? Hey?
I know. I don't know why it's not. It's like keeps shutting off.
That's funny. So while you fiddle with the light, maybe I'll explain. So life between life
All
is
right.
kind of the place that souls go between incarnations. So we know that we have past lives. I mean, if you're on this podcast by now, it's a given, it's an accepted fact. We are reincarnating all the time. We're souls on this infinite journey. And if you don't know that by now listening to me, then maybe you're listening to the wrong podcast. But this is the general consensus, and this is what we know listening to this podcast. So what we're talking about is where we go when we make all our soul contracts, and what happens like when we pass away, and what's that process. And so I would love to hear from you, just sharing some of the most interesting things that have come through in these hypnosis sessions. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything you feel to share.
All right, I'm just going to dive right in here because
Mhm.
why not, right? Because when we were doing our centering, by the way, Beck is one of the only, I've done a bunch of different podcast interviews, and they're all wonderful and amazing, but Beck guided us in this amazing centering exercises, bringing in these guides, which was just so powerful. Arcturians were coming in. I was like, these are I know the Arcturians, but I haven't connected with them for a while, but I was like, here's some multidimensional beings. Maybe you work with them, but they're right. So I see them in the Akashic records with their, big eyes and just beautiful, divine, feminine, like mothering energy. Right. So I'm going to begin with multidimensional beings, which other people
Amazing.
sometimes call aliens, but I don't like to use that term. So one of the things in light, well, maybe I won't drive it. I'll give a little bit of a background to help people
Wherever, like, honestly, the
I
level
know.
of people listening to this, they're
They
pretty,
know.
like, I've been talking about aliens, and we're good. You don't need to
They're
like
aware.
lube anything up. You
Okay.
just
Well,
get
I
straight in
won't.
there.
I'm just gonna give a little like background on like how
Okay.
what happens when people go in. So the way I take people into the spirit realm is through timeline regression, and I take them into a past life. Well, first we really go through memory of childhood, inner child, womb space, then into a past life, then through their death in that past life, and then they go up into spirit. And then generally they're being guided by energy. So light, maybe there's a spirit guide that meets them. Sometimes they're just going to source and just being with that, with that source energy. I'm just going to keep turning it back on and on if that's okay. I'm not sure what's going on. Okay. And yeah, the light turned on when I said light.
I was going to say, it wanted to, it wanted to show
say
the
hi,
visual
right?
for coming back to source.
Yeah. And then sometimes they, go to their soul group and they're meeting with their soulmate and seeing a soulmate. It's just generally different colors and lights. Going to the Council of Elders in the Akashic Records and asking questions about, why is this happening in my life and what's my purpose? And then the last stop, and I'm going to get to the in-between stop in just a minute, but the last stop is the room of life selection where people can really view on screens different bodies, different scenarios and different lifetimes. Parents, do they choose their parents choose them? Why, if they have some medical issue, why did they choose that? But one of the coolest things that also people sometimes ask about when I do life between life regressions is what planet they're from. And I've had some clients ask, they ask what planet they're from, and what often will come up is some different sorts of, there's like a dusty, I've had people talk about a dusty planet where there wasn't water and they're like had to leave their planet to go find water. That's come up a few times. Very interesting. When I did my own, I was connecting in with Lyra, and it's interesting because we're talking about the Lionsgate. And on Lyra, I was aware that that's really the planet that most humans come from. Like that's as you know. But I don't think I was aware of this at the time that, I was like, well, my planet was destroyed and I had to leave. And as a lot of people know, there was this battle, of that this planet, a lot of planets were destroyed, but Lyra was destroyed. So they had to leave. And so
I want to say there's something in this for a few people. If someone's receiving something, I feel my solar plexus, I want to throw up everywhere, which usually means someone's receiving something. So if you're receiving this, yes.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, I'm just sending love to whoever is experiencing this. It's like painful. It's a trauma of like the place where you were from no longer, like I really feel it. It's like,
right.
Yeah, just letting
You
that
think
energy
about
move.
There's like Star Wars. I was reading this somewhere that there's truth in the stories in Star Wars, like that planet that Princess Leia, was from Alderaan that was destroyed. I mean, these things happen to us and they happen to us. And so it's in our cellular DNA, it's in our life blood. Should I just leave the light off? I don't know. It seems like
it doesn't really matter. I mean, no one really watches this on YouTube, so
okay.
and if you do, guys,
right.
whatever. We're chilling.
So anyway, so then I've actually, somebody else said once they were like an insect, like a giant, like praying mantis creature. There's one of the things that was also really interesting was when there was another, one woman who's very psychic. She was connecting with the Council of Elders in the Akashic Records. And I don't know if you've ever done this work, but generally the way the Council of Elders or the masters will show up in the Akashic Records, which is it's like the Jedi Council. They're in a half circle. They wear robes. They're ancient. They're very wise, and it's a place of reverence. And I've had people say, they're not my friends, but I feel like they're helping me understand something. And these are people that have no idea about, I try not to tell people too much so they could just, have their own experience. But so they, so they're like, and this one woman said they are from other planets. Like they have different symbols on them, and like, I think she said they have their faces. They don't want to scare me. So they're wearing robes because they look different than what we would expect. And it was so fascinating to hear that, because I hadn't picked up on that myself. I picked up on different, we all have different experiences, but yeah, I remember I'll just say, having a life between life myself, the thing that really stuck out for me was I was home. I was like, I actually started crying. This was actually a QHHT session I had, which is Dolores Cannon's method. And then I had a life between life. Anyway, but I was just started sobbing and she's like, why are you crying? And I was like, I'm home. This is my true home and I miss it. And it was just, the colors were so vibrant, and there was this healing chamber where I would go, like a greenhouse. I called it like a rejuvenation space. And there were animals that were extinct on Earth that were there. I had a job, and my job was I was looking through this looking glass at people on Earth, and I was trying to help them wake up. Makes sense, because that's what I do now, right? But I would get frustrated because they weren't waking up fast enough, which also makes sense for what you get it, I'm sure. And I would go into the rejuvenation chamber to recharge when I would get frustrated. And I was wearing like long robes, and I think a lot of us I've heard this from a few people, that we're taller and thinner and we're younger, but there's something about being tall and thin, which is very interesting in the spirit realm. Another thing that we can also pick up on in the life between life is just activities that we're doing. So for me, myself, one of the activities that I was doing, and I had this other guide who was a specialized guide who was helping me. And this, I had the soul group, but then I would go off with like this other study group, and we would study the topography of Earth and look at what was happening on the planet. And it was interesting because I don't care about topography now. It's not something I do, but I do love the Earth, and I just really connect deeply with plants. And I think that, and there was something about, I was studying like which animals were extinct and also how to help people communicate with animals. So we have different things that we all kind of maybe are already drawn to in some ways. When we go into the spirit realm, we can learn a little more, like, well, that's why I'm interested in that, because I literally specialize in this as in my higher self, as a soul, at a soul level. So it's just such a powerful way to learn about who we really are, because when we're in our human bodies, we're not who we really are. We have egos, and we have programming, and we have past life karma, and but when we can remember like ourselves as these eternal souls filled with light, it's like, oh yeah, this is just a blip. Like, this Earth is really hard, we're learning a lot of lessons here, and we're all volunteering, like Dolores Karen talks about, the 3 waves of volunteers to help bring the planet into higher state of consciousness, into 5D. But nobody said it was going to be easy. And for people like you, me, starseeds, we've been on other planets, and probably a lot of your listeners, for many of our lifetimes. And so being in a dense human body with how mean people are to each other here on Earth is really hard. And I think that's important to say right now too, that some people, it's hard, like to the point where they just want to end their lives because they just don't want to be here anymore, and they just don't understand. They're so empathic, but that isn't the answer, because we're just gonna have to repeat it. So
It's interesting I actually want to bring this up because it's interesting. I've been asked this question before about like ending your own life. And I went through this, by the way. Like I've had years of wanting to end my life and,
mm,
trucking my little human tantrum of like, this sucks. I want to be back in my ball of light. I also got
yeah,
super emotional when you were talking about this place in the rejuvenation tank. I'm like, oh, it's like the ice bath here. But like, that's the ice bath for me. Is that right? But like, also I was like, oh,
yes,
I nearly started crying of like that, fuck, I want to go back. But like, also it's cool to be here. Where was my
mm,
train of thought was around around ending one's life. It's really interesting, the perspective. I think it was in Journey of the Souls, they were talking about suicide. And there is a big trigger warning, guys, on here. If you are dealing with
mhm,
this, please reach out. Like, there are many resources for you. We don't want anyone to do that. It's a reality if you're sensitive that you feel these things. And I don't want to offend anyone with what I'm about to say. I'm just sharing what was in this book about suicide. And it was interesting to me that when someone committed suicide in their human life, always as a soul, they'd meet their guides and they'd be like, oh, fuck, why did I do that? That was such a shame. Like,
mhm,
because I had these lessons and I had like the effort that was put into everything lining up, like all of these people that I was here to meet with, and, all the effort, all my guides and the council and everyone went through to find this human body for me basically to be in. And then I ended it prematurely. And it's not that the council or the guides or whatever are like disappointed in you or they're angry. And like, they're more just like, it's a fucking shame. Like, now you have to go start at the start. So guys, if you are thinking about ending your life, like, you can do it, but just imagine all of the shit that you went through, having to go through that again next time,
yeah,
and still have to, like, so just know that, like, no one's you're not in trouble if you do that. It's not the end. It's not the end. You're going to keep living on, to not to negate this situation or make it small or anything. But it's also like, if you're going through something, it's because you have the resources to overcome it. And it's funny because they were also talking about the distinctions between, like, if someone was suffering immensely physically through an illness or whatever, then it's seen as there's more empathy towards it or some understanding from the guides. Do you know what I'm talking
yes,
about? Have you
yes. It's
seen anything
different
like
as a
that?
mental.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, actually, well, I haven't actually had a person who has ended their own life in a past life. Although
Mm-hmm.
I have in a past life. I
Right.
jumped out a window when I was a
Wow.
failed writer as a man in a recent past life in like a city, which is interesting because I ended up anyway writing a
You
book
wrote the
this
book.
right,
Yay, you
yeah,
did
but I was not happy
it.
then, and but I have had clients who had been were really traumatized, like murdered, a few people murdered,
Mm,
and then and in the case of like real trauma, whether, somebody ended your life for you or you ended your own life prematurely, you're going to go through like in like a period of like cocooning, kind of like it's not isolation. That sounds kind of a bad way, but they just take you, you're just taken elsewhere, and
mm,
you're not going to see your soul group yet. You're not going to see the counselor yet. You're just receiving healing. And actually, that I told you that when I mentioned in the beginning about my mother's friend, I actually saw in the dream she was rowing herself out to sea in a rowboat. That was the image. She was just going out like in the sunset. It was very peaceful, but she was by herself. So I think the hardest part from what have heard and what I believe is just the self, uh I guess, what's the word, regret that people have as souls. Are like, I really guess I shouldn't have done that. I really should have thought that through before I made that impulsive decision. But something I want to that Michael Newton does talk about, in terms of why some people do that, and I really believe that the people who are feeling like that's the only option, more often than not, they're extremely strong empaths. Maybe like probably like you are. I mean, you're very intuitive. And I think for people who are suicidal almost all the time, because I've known a few people who've unfortunately made that choice, they don't have a filter for all the energies that they're picking up on, and they have attachments, probably they're carrying negative energies that aren't theirs. And there's that voice saying like, this is what you should do. This is the solution, when it's not, but it's very, it's difficult to move past that. the other thing is, and that's why I like angels, angels, Archangel Michael, just angels are so powerful. They're so high vibration. If you're in that situation, and I'm going to say this because maybe people listening, just ask to help, please give me hope, just so if you don't like angels, just light, just something higher, help, please give
I
me.
was praying to God every day. And
Yes.
I would say
Yes.
that, like, you're right. I was extremely empathetic at that point. Empathic, sorry. At that point, I was getting heavily attacked and siphoned and drained, and various things were going on. And my own trauma was also coming up. So it was like many, many things. But it's because I feel everything and everyone so deeply. And sometimes it's hard to know, like, what's mine, what's theirs. What is, when you're that much of a channel, you lose yourself in that. So yeah, I think that what you've said is so true. But God, like, calling on God for me was literally, I
Yeah.
was praying on the floor, crying every day, being like, God, you need to help me, like mama earth, like someone, you need to help
Mhm.
me, please, like, give me enough love to get through this, please give me enough love. And then at the end I realized I was enough love. Of course I was enough love to get through that, because I chose that contract. I wouldn't have chosen to go take on all this stuff that I took on to transmute if I didn't
Yes.
have that love. But unfortunately, I don't know, like some people just don't have, in that moment, they don't have that perceived strength, which they have it. I'm not special to find that in me, but it was like, God, it fucking took a lot for me to find that in me. And that's what I want to
Yeah.
say. Like, I don't judge anyone who makes that choice, because honestly, the thing that was flashing through my mind was literally, like, I couldn't do that to my parents. That was the only, not like the and I'm a pussy. Like, I don't think I don't think I'd enjoy the actual act of it, but it was like,
Yeah.
I could not do that to my family. Like, that was the only thing, no other reason. It was like, I couldn't do that to my
Mhm.
family. But some
Look what
people
you're
aren't
doing
close.
today. Right.
Exactly.
But look,
So
look what you did it. Like, you got out
yeah,
of it. So if you can get out of it, there's hope
yeah,
for others. And so yeah, but surrendering to just to light, and that can really help lift people up. So
yeah.
good
And
for
we
you.
have
Very
we
brave.
have these families of soul beings and light beings, and even if you can't connect to them, like, if you ask them to help you, they literally, like, your guides, the team that you put you in this body and sent you down here, they're supposed to be there for you, and they're not going to let you do that. Like, if you really need help, it's like, call on them. They're here to help us all the
Yeah.
time. And
There,
it's hard to
yeah,
listen sometimes, but they're there.
right. The
Yeah.
only thing is that we can override what they're sending us with our free will. And that's why people end up doing that, because they're not, for whatever reason, able or willing to
Mhm.
hear that
Yeah.
sort of that loving guidance. And that's, then because we do have, that's part of our, as our way to kind of evolve and become our highest and best selves, is going through each life, breaking patterns, trying to do it. That didn't work out so well in the last life. So now I'm going to work on it again in this life. I'm going to choose to be born into a family who's going to harm me, who's going to abuse me. Why? Because then I'm going to learn about forgiveness, or I'm going to learn about self-love. And I wouldn't learn about that if I didn't go through that. But a lot of people, it's unfortunate. It really sucks that we don't know why, that we don't even have most people, I'd say maybe that will change to be just some people eventually, don't have the awareness that this was planned. It's not that they're being punished, or that they're bad, or that there's something wrong with them, but they're actually incredibly strong if this is what they've, chosen.
Yeah.
And that would be for you too, because
That's what I say all the time on here.
yeah, look
Like,
at how
you don't,
strong.
the grace and the love that your soul is capable of to choose that mission, whatever it
Yeah,
was. Like, that's the flip side of it. Like, if you've chosen that dark stuff, imagine how much light you have within you if you chose that.
that's
Like,
right.
not everyone's chosen that. I keep reminding myself that every
That's
day.
right.
I'm like, not everyone chose.
Well, and
Not
some
everyone
of the
chose that back.
no, and some of the, you probably know, some of the most clearest channels of, psychics, intuitives, people who are pretty public out there doing this work, have had the most horrific,
Yeah.
childhood sexual abuse, like real dark stuff that they have survived. And I believe that their soul left their body to survive that experience. And so that helped them, they developed that ability to channel because they were out of their body. But then they have to, then there's like the reconnecting with the body and healing. But I think that becomes like a gift in a way, which is a weird way to
Yeah,
say it.
this dissociation was literally what saved me as a kid when my mom was abusing us. I mean, she wasn't abusing us as badly as some people were abused, but it was still, it was child abuse. And when she would go into a state, I would literally just leave my body, disassociate. And I would literally pass out. I remember I would always just randomly pass out, and I'd wake up with my family around me, and I just pass out, this lightest little thing of pain. And at the
Wow.
time, like growing up, I never understood it. And now in hindsight, I'm like, oh, I just leave my body when shit
Uh-huh.
gets difficult, because that's how I cope. But actually,
Right.
it's not a coping mechanism, it's a strength, because now I
It's
can
a
do that
strength.
like tactically, like when I'm in an ice
Right.
bath or something
Right.
like that, right? Hi, beautiful soul. Allow me to interrupt this broadcast for just a second. If you're a soulpreneur on a sacred mission, or just someone looking to connect with their soul purpose, their gifts, and their multidimensional self, I have something I am so excited to share with you. The Soul Mission Accelerator is possibly my most groundbreaking and expansive work yet. It contains 12 low-cost, high-potency sacred activations that will have you shifting through old limitations, patterns, karmic loops, and blockages at quantum speeds. These activations will support you with everything you require energetically to anchor in the timeline and reality you desire to create. If that means more soul clients, tribe, opportunities, and abundance, or just to anchor a soul purpose that is fulfilling and effortlessly abundant, you can grab $44 off the total price by using the code CRACKEDOPEN in capital letters in the checkout, or grab each activation individually as they call to your soul. Now let's get back to this episode. What's the general, like the people that you're working with? Are they younger souls? Are they older souls? Do you get that sense like with the people that come to you?
Well, for people who are doing life between life regressions, they're definitely older souls, because
Yeah.
they know, like, they're ready to do that. And it's interesting, how they like, oh yeah, I've had a past life and I know about this and I've read Michael Newton and and they're intuitive. So, but I do work with some people who are younger souls who are not, we're all going through the process of awakening, but they're in the beginning stages of awakening, who are just working on some basic stuff, like, trying to quiet their minds, trying to learn about meditation. They're learning about the concept of ego. So, and they're maybe learning about how they can connect, what sources of, higher guidance they could connect with. But, and so I don't mind like working with all sorts of different people. It's good for me to like remember because I was, I was asleep, which I don't, no judgment there, but I remember what it was like. I just believed everything I was told and listened to the news and all that stuff. Um, and I really think it's really important for me to be able to help people as they move through that process, because, you know, I don't know when you started waking up. Maybe you've been awake your whole life. Some people have, their whole life,
No,
but
I wish.
yeah, it
Yeah.
wasn't that way. But
Yeah.
it's a crazy process. You start to think like, am I going insane? Or like, if I told people the things I was thinking about, they might literally institutionalize me.
Mhm.
Um, and you start to lose friends and, just everything. And people, it's a crazy process. And so I feel kind of bad for people who are going through it just in the past few years, because it's so fast and there's so
Mm.
much to see. But on the other hand, I'm like, just get it over with. For me, it was a more gradual sort of, I had some time to adjust. And but I love working with people at all stages. But of course, I really love working with people who are like fully awake and really intuitive, because then they can, I hear things that they're saying in the regression, and I find it just so fascinating. And I want to, maybe I'll write another book with their
Tell me
permission.
some of the most interesting things that you've heard, like super, I guess, like evolved souls say, like top 2 things, and then we'll change the subject. I just want to
Well,
get as much as I can
just
out of
the
this
other
topic.
day,
It's interesting.
okay, this gets a little dark, but I
Oh,
guess
we
if it's
love the
okay.
dark. I'm all about that
Okay.
dark goddess
So
vibe.
just the other day, I try to avoid the dark too much as that one, but it's okay. Like, we have to see the dark to know the light. Um, there was a woman who did life between life regression, and she actually was telling me that she, in real life, was on vacation somewhere, and I don't want to use identifying things with identifier, but a relative of hers had just recently crossed over, and she was really in a dark place. And she heard anyway, they were on vacation, this house down the street. They were like chanting some dark chants. We probably know what they were doing. They were invoking some really dark energies. And that night she heard this knock. She no, she had a dream. That's right. She went to sleep. She had a dream, or it was like a vision dream, that there was this entity that was trying to come in this house. And what she said was to this end, and she actually described it was just what you could imagine it would be. Then she said, when she saw it, she said, "Go to God, go to God, go to God." And it was kind of like, okay, and it left. And it wasn't, and it was kind of confused because it thought it was like there. And so before the regression, we were talking about, and she said, "I want to ask like what that thing was at my door," and that she wanted to ask the Council of Elders. And I said to her, I was like, "You probably know what that was, you know?"
Mm.
And but then when she did go on the regression, she asked the Council of Elders. They told her same thing, like, "You know what that was? It was there. It was trying to feed off you were in a lower vibrational state." And again, it's all vibrational, which is, there are dark things out there, but they're not going to touch you if you're bringing in light and you're bringing in the name of God and Jesus. And, not to be religious, but those are the highest, most high vibrational beings of light. There's Mother Mary, there's
Homie's got you. That's why I love him. Homie's always got
right.
you.
Yes. Yeah. Or yes, there's Buddha, there's Yogananda, there's all kinds of, ascended masters, but Archangel Michael, like soup, that's the angel that can help. Anyway, but the Council of Elders was telling her that you helped that being cross over into the light. Right. And I'm getting shivers as I say this, because then she was asking, part of her other questions were like, what is my purpose? What am I supposed to be doing? And they said, and she got very emotional when she shared this, "You're the bridge between the living and the dead." And part of her path is to help these dark entities, because there's a bunch of them floating around now, and help them see, like, you can go to the light. You all have light within you. And so there's one less vibrational thing out there that is trying to bother us all. So anyway, I thought that was really amazing that, and so she's now, and she does that. She does, like, goes to houses in her actual life sometimes and clears energy. And anyway,
I've done that. It's very powerful. I've cleared houses. It's intense, but everyone gets the opportunity to go right to the light, and you just need to give them the space and the time. And they're, at first, they'll be like, "Get the fuck out, get away from me. I'm angry. I'm going to try and push you out." But if you're like, "Hey, I'm just here with love. Can I help? Can I open a portal, like, for you to leave?" Like, and you show them, "I'm not afraid." Like, it's such a different experience to, "Oh, this thing is the devil," and it's, it doesn't have to be like that, is what I've noticed with entities. And I've dealt with a lot of them. I've talked about it on here. It's not a fun topic to talk about, but it's a reality
but it's important, because it's a real thing. And I like that you said that, because I think, whether we use the word devil or Satan, or like some of those words, and there's other, there are beings that people do summon that I'm not going to use their names, but they only have power. And this is what the masters tell me when I go in the Akashic records: don't give any of them, and the ones who think they control things, any more power than they actually have. Like, if we believe they have power to control us, then they do. If we believe that they're just like screaming toddlers, like having a tantrum and doing all this ridiculous nonsense, which is what they want to, which is what they are, then they're like, "Okay, you and your 3D reality, you can do whatever you want, try to scare us with all these fake things you're creating." And we can get all worked up about that, or we can just be like, "You know what? That's not my reality. I see what you're doing, but I like to view it as a highway. Like, that you're on your highway, I'm on my highway, and I see what you're doing, but I'm not going to allow myself to, with my emotion of fear or anger, to be manipulated and controlled by that." And so we have that power and that ability.
And to even not feel like we have to fight back. Like, that's so many light workers, like, "I need to fight back. I need to fight this." And I was in that rage for years at the start.
Me too.
Wanting to tell everyone and wanting to know, fuck the system. And then I realized I'm just giving it energy. The more even if it's like the energy of rebellion, because I'm an Aquarius, but like a lot of my plus stuff, I'm not all Aquarius, but a lot of my, what am I trying to say? It doesn't matter. There's a lot of Aquarius in my chart. That's the fuck you rebel. That's still giving it power. It's still giving it energy, when you could just be like, "Oh, I decide that you can't affect me, and I decide to live outside your reality," which I think is this shift that's happening now, as more of it breaks apart. that stuff's not going to go away. It's not just going to disappear into, still going to be there. There's still going to be that stuff. It's what are you choosing to, it's actually what I think it was Brandon and I spoke about this recently on a podcast. Not on now this podcast, it was another podcast. We talked about, I was channeling about this new earth and what it's going to look like. And I'm curious if you've channeled anything about, you know, what you feel this shift is, or like, I don't know why I felt to ask that, because I was feeling and what was coming through is that there's two timelines, but it's not two different earths. It's the same earth. It's just what you're tuned into is what you'll see. And it's like literally they're still doing whatever they're doing, but it's like you walk straight past them and they can't see you, sort of thing. Like it's like they're just which is what the whole of like the whole COVID situation was like for me. I was traveling, I was doing stuff, and it was like whoop, 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 just kept, you know, missing people, which is great. So
so I did pick up on something once when I was asking about, you know, 5D, because we all, you know, we talk about 3D, 4D, 5D, like what the heck is 5D? And, you know, are we going to another planet? Like, are we going to be just turning into light bodies who survive on light, which may happen eventually. But what I was shown was, this is a cool analogy for people who hopefully some people who are younger might not know what this is about, but anyway, you probably do. But do you remember those old overhead projectors that people like would put like a slide on and that would show them? Okay. So they were showing me that the two realities, like the 3D and the 5D, you know, people who are still in the matrix, were still like in the illusions of the programming, that they're on one slide, their reality is one slide. And then the 5D, the new earth, which is what, you know, we're moving into, and doesn't mean we're better than, or, you know, whatever, but just connection, unity, awakening, you know, third eye opening, like all this stuff, remembering who we are as divine beings and really connecting with the earth. That's, I think, a big part of it, and creating our own little subcultures, self-sufficiency outside the system of control. We're on another slide. And so when you put the two slide, like one slide on top of it, or one transparency on top of another, and you see it on the wall, it looks like it's like one, but really they're two different planes. So that's really
a really cool analogy. I like
isn't
that.
It?
Yeah. It's a good analogy. Yeah, because they're transparent and they're like it. Yeah, I like it.
I know. I mean, I picked up on it, but it was from the masters. You know, I can't take credit. They shared it, but I think it's interesting because I know when, you know, I had read some different channelings back in like 2018, 2019, and they were saying like, you're going to be living in a different reality than, you know, people, you know, you're going to say goodbye to people. And I certainly have experienced that in the past few years with COVID. You know, I definitely spoke out about what I thought, and, you know, I did lose relationships, but, you know, it was, and so that on the one hand, I'm like, oh man, that's so sad. And, you know, I had to leave this reality and say goodbye to all these people, but I didn't really. I mean, I interact with certain people in my family, for instance, because they're my family. But friends, you know, that's a whole different story. But I think, you know, I think it doesn't mean that we're not interacting, you know, how do I say this? When we're living in that new earth consciousness, you know, 5D reality frequency, really, we're still seeing people who are living in 5D, 3D, and, you know, and like our neighbors, like we talk to them, we interact with them, but we're not in the same like level of consciousness, same frequency. And so the way they experience reality is very different than the way we experience reality. Somebody else could think, well, everything's horrible and the world's going to hell and it's just horrible and bad and scary. And then we, you know, somebody else might think, well, actually, I'm really excited. I see this really hopeful, this beautiful way that's coming. And so it's two different perspectives based on the same, you know, the same sort of information, I guess, that, but, and then, you know, so there's that, but then you don't really interact with that person a lot either. You might, you know, touch upon them here and there, but you're really living, your paths don't cross. I mean, I have so many people that I really don't want to run into anymore. And I could run into them a lot and I never do because I'm just like, I'm not meant to, I'm in a different plane.
Yeah. Isn't that funny? It's great how that works. Amazing. Yeah. I love that. And that's very aligned to what I feel as well. Like lots of people are saying, oh, aliens are going to come down and take us to another planet and this and that. And I don't know. I feel like it's all a bit We're just trying to like make it all complicated when it doesn't need to be.
Right.
Speaking of aliens and other planets, I think a good place to kind of start to wrap this up would be the Lionsgate. And at the start, when we were talking, you'd mentioned some stuff was coming through, and that's really alive for you now. So what's coming through for you around that, and what would you like to share?
Well, it's been coming through for a while. I mean, I'm not an astrologer, but I feel energy, read the
Mhm.
energy, and I felt just this a lot of light coming in ever since the solstice, and and I think for really, so it's the whole summer, at least here in, US, I guess. And what happens when lots of light comes in is that it illuminates the dark within us. It illuminates the shadows. And so I've been experiencing this myself, like old patterns, old crap that I thought that I'd cleared, and it's coming up again. And it's annoying, but that's part of what this light is doing. Is we're downloading so much, we're there's a lot of activations happening, and in order for our bodies to hold space for all the light that we're receiving, we have to clear away all the junk. And in order to clear something away, it has to be called out of the shadows, be brought out, be seen, be, acknowledged, to then be transmuted, healed, and released. So I've been going through that myself, like in 2 different waves throughout this past few months. Um, and then of course and I know other people, a lot of people have. Um, and that, I mean, the energies can lead to just like kind of like paralysis, like I don't even want to do anything, just too like overwhelmed, like that, how it can feel that way, just
Mhm.
overwhelmed.
I can
And
relate.
that is right. And that is, and
Days
so,
in bed. Yeah.
yeah, and that is normal because I'm tired, because there's so much energy
Mhm.
coming at us. So I think, what the Lionsgate represents is 8-8. 8 is a number of abundance, of flow, it's infinity on its side. And from what I understand, it's when, the star Sirius is seen. The Egyptians knew about this, and they were really aware of, the star Sirius. It's around, like, the sun is in Leo, so that's why they call it the Lionsgate. So I was actually just writing about this today. It's a really good time, which happens to be tomorrow. Even if you listen to this after 8-8, the energies are still around after that time, so it's not too late. But just sitting in with, the energy, the color of yellow, citrine, the marigolds, sunflowers, amber, like yellow crystals, yellow flowers, being outside in the earth, and just focusing on what it is that you want to create in your life, manifesting, coming up with an intention. Maybe it's abundance, which isn't just, it is money, but it's abundance is um abundance of love, abundance of friendship, abundance of garden, vegetables in your garden, or whatever. Because this time is a really powerful time to manifest what it is that we seek. And so we do, and that's going to keep happening more and more in the next few years, that we do have to be careful with our thoughts. Like if we're thinking, oh, I can't, and it's not, and I'm never, wow, you might start to manifest that, which you don't want.
Mm.
So let's think about,
Yeah, it's very quick.
yes. And
Mm.
so then we can learn to like reframe our thoughts, um, and just focus on, what do you want? How do you want to feel? So it comes at a really appropriate time that we're talking about all this now, because it's doesn't mean, oh, I'm going to visualize this amazing rainbow, beautiful world, and then I'm going to be there, because we still got to clear out all our crap. And
Mhm.
we're going to keep doing that, but it's going to get easier and easier to move through it more quickly, because we're learning more tools. We have divine guides to help us, and we have a lot of awareness of, like, okay, there's my inner child. How's my inner child doing? And how do I, quiet my mind and separate from the stories that are from, old stuff that's not me anymore, past lives? How can I connect with a past life and clear that trauma? And anyway, so
The
it's a
other
process,
interesting,
but
yeah, the other
yeah.
interesting thing I want to say that's happening this Lionsgate is that Venus is in retrograde.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that is like literally the dark goddess going into a fucking descent. And I think actually it might be moved now, but a week ago when I was feeling into this black moon, which is Lilith, she's again real underworld energy, was right on, I think it was the moon or the sun. So that energy was really present in the astrology as well. So I feel, and this is the journey I'm taking my people through tomorrow in a workshop, is this, it's going down into the depths of like our own inner underworld to reclaim our power, because again, the sun, solar plexus, like that's our power center. And so it's like coming up, and oof, I feel it in my whole body as I'm speaking about it. It's a space for us to really reclaim those parts of ourselves who gave our voice away, who were too much, who were too, whatever it is, people pleasing, self-abandoning, like hiding ourselves away. It's like our time to come and shine. And we've also just had a node shift as well. So the nodes have just, the south and north node have switched into a whole new different sign. So again, it's like this huge shift of us to be able to step into our light, step into, and I think actually, I'm pretty sure, I could be wrong and I'll correct myself in the thing if I'm wrong. I think they've shifted into Libra and Gemini. No, Libra is definitely one of them. And whatever the opposite to Gemini, the Libra is, which I don't think it is Gemini.
Yeah.
Do you know?
I don't know. I don't know.
Anyway, but it's about like intrapersonal relationships and like independence. So it's about like working with others in collaboration while still maintaining your own boundaries. And like, who am I standing up and being myself in front of everyone and shining while still collaborating with others and not losing myself. So it's all of this magical energy at the moment. This is a really big one. I don't usually serve for Lionsgate. I'm like in my own space receiving, and I've received a lot of downloads and upgrades and all sorts of things. But like, I'm here in Mexico, which is very powerful land because of the cenotes, which are the I mean, you know this, but I'm for the audience, like they're the underground water, like open air water. They're not open air, but they're water chambers basically under the ground. And they actually link up to the grid, which links up all the pyramids. So it's a huge fucking portal of energy here. Massive. The Mayan people knew all of this stuff. They were super onto it. I'm talking very, very highly of them because I know I was definitely Mayan in a past life, which is why I'm here. But anyway, I've landed here, and it's a Syrian portal, and I have lots of connection to Sirius and pyramids and all this amplification energy. So I'm like, wow, it's like really big. And this year they're like, you need to serve, because I think all these energies, and because also Dark Goddess is completely my territory. So it's like, let's go on this big journey and like go into the fucking place and like extract everyone. So this is a really big time, guys, for like taking your power back, stepping into your power, stepping into your mission, stepping into your gifts, stepping into your light, shining. So these are the sorts of things to be focusing on manifesting. Like, what is my highest vision? What is my highest mission? How can I step up? How can I lead? How can I, and maybe you don't want to lead, maybe you're not a leader, and that's okay too, but like, how can I shine my soul frequency and what's preventing me? So as much as it is for manifesting, it's also for clearing, because to manifest, we need to clear, as Rachel was saying, like stuff's got to come up to clear that shit. Like, so you want to serve 30 million people, great. I'm sure that there's some shadow there about why that's not a good idea, right? Or where you have served 30 million people and you got burnt at the stake or whatever. So that's all the stuff that's going to come up. And it's been coming up for me, like as I step into new iterations of my mission. So all of that is really present now. It's really intense energy. I have been eating nonstop for like 3 weeks. Like I don't know what is going on. I thought, because I stopped, I have hape, which is like nicotine, and I stopped it for a couple of weeks, and I was like, oh, it's just withdrawals from my nicotine, and that's why I'm eating so much. And then I started again. I'm still eating constantly. So I think it's like, yeah, literally my body is like, there is so much energy that I just am nonstop eating, and that's fine. So we all have our things to like deal with these energies as they're coming through, guys. They're not going to slow down, is what I want to say. So if you're like waiting for them to chill out, yeah, I don't really have anything to say to you except for like lol. Yeah. But we adjust, right? So
get used to it. Yeah.
Get used to it, find your coping strategies, eat lots of chocolate like I've been doing, if that helps you, find people who support you. And now I'm going on a bit of a love rant, but I needed to weigh in as well, because I'm going to put this out for Lionsgate. Like, it's really intense energy at the moment. Make sure to ground, take care of your human. So in summary, is there anything else to bring it back into this podcast and this moment in this present time that you feel called to share, or anything that you didn't get to say that you would love to?
Well, I think, this is timely, I guess. I'm going to be teaching a class on angels, how to communicate with angels in September, an online class. And anyway, and the reason I am bringing that up now and for in this podcast and now at this time of year is that for me, when I first started opening my third eye and really moving into a place of trust of what I was opening up to, I heavily leaned upon angels and Archangel Michael specifically. And since then, I always, ask, I see somebody suffering, I ask the angels to help them, just connecting. Their energy is so powerful and they can help shift things. And it's directly connected to that God source energy. So when we tap in, they give us, the thoughts or help shift situations. It doesn't mean that, all of a sudden everything's gonna be better because I asked my angels, but it can really do some magical things. So if you're interested, there's that I'll be offering. But even if not, just take some time to call upon. We've talked about a lot of things, some dark stuff. But here I'm holding one right now. There's a quartz crystal angel. But just ask. And so that's where we use our free will to say, can you please help me? Like you did, and just help me. Thank you for helping me. And then that can do such powerful things. Just asking. If you know the color, that's great. If you know the name, that's great. But you just focus on the intention, the angel that can help me heal, that can help me feel hope, that can help me learn to love myself. And then I think that's sort of a gateway to then all these other energies that are available to us. Because ultimately we want to be connecting with love and, unconditional love for ourselves, for others, for the planet. And that's the vibration that's more powerful than anything else. The ones we're angry at, who have been doing all these crazy, insane things to try to, we think, ruin our lives in the past few years and, controlled humanity for thousands of years. It's a lot of anger there. I have a lot of anger, that I've worked on transmuting. How can we not be angry? But with love, it's like, and that's what, the energy of the Christed one, the Christed grid, Jesus can help too. It's like with that love, and we can learn to say, I see what you're doing. I see what you've done, yet you also can be loved. And even if I don't feel like I can do it, I can ask these angels or these higher dimensional beings to love you. That's how we're going to move the planet forward, because as long as we're holding on to anger of other people in our lives and of anybody, really, it's going to hold us back. And it's a process, it's not, and we don't want a spiritual bypass, like, oh, I love you. And then we have simmering anger, we connect with that anger, we process it, we release it. But anyway, so I think that's all I want to say. And then also say thank you to you for just an awesome conversation, just really, really special. And this was unique in other ones I've done. Like, just, we had such a beautiful sort of vibe going and things that we talked about. So thank you.
If people want to find you, Rachel, I didn't get to ask you that. you plugged your thing, and I would really invite people to go check that out. But if they want to connect with you, they want to find you on social media, how can they do that?
Yeah.
I'll put your details down below as well, but just, you can say
them
verbally.
My website is soulfulworkconsulting.com or rachelhortonwhite.com. And yeah, I'm on Facebook, Soulful Work Consulting, Instagram, Soulful Work Consulting. And yeah, that's probably the best way. Reach out if you have questions.
Thank you so much for coming on. That was a pleasure. Thank you, Brandon, again, for another amazing hookup. Love you, homie. And yeah, guys, please take care of yourselves. Relax, rest, do what you got to do to stay grounded this Lionsgate during these big energies. Eat if you've got to eat, cry if you've got to cry, masturbate if you've got to masturbate, do what you got to do. I love you all. Thank you all for listening. And until next time, beautiful souls. Thank you for listening to another episode of Cracked Open. Don't forget to hit subscribe and share with a friend if this episode has served you in any way. For more information about the work that I do, or to get in touch with me, read the show notes or head to beckmylonas.com. Until next time, beautiful soul.